So the PEA confirms that as a smaller project of 15,000 tonnes a day through the crushing plant, which is quite a reasonable sized project, it'll produce on average 110,000 ounces a year for the first 15 years, and additionally another 2.5 million ounces of silver over those same 15 years to start with.
Well, hello to viewers. Today I'm speaking with Alan Pangbourne, CEO of Chesapeake Gold Corp. And Chesapeake is an exploration company focusing on progressing the world-class gold and silver Metates project in Mexico. Alan, thanks for joining Assay TV.
Good morning, Adam. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Just wanted to start off with our discussion to get a quick introduction of Chesapeake, just for the viewers who might be new to the company.
Sure. So Chesapeake has been around for quite a while. However, they did a deal late last year, early this year, where we changed the management team and came in with a new concept on how we could develop the Metates project. The Metates project is our largest single project in Mexico. It's over 20 million ounces of gold and over 550 million ounces of silver in resource. And we've come up with a technology that allows us to develop it in a much lower capital cost environment, giving us reasonable production at a smaller scale to step into it and then look at being able to expand it. So we believe this PEA shows that we've got a credible, financeable, deliverable, and then more importantly, expandable project that can take us from the starter project where we only touch about 20% of the deposit to take advantage of the entire resource as we step in and expand, which sounds like an old way of developing a project rather than the very large Big Bang approach. But this is, I believe, much more attractive for a smaller explorer developer like we are, because it does give us a financeable option that we can do without having to bring in a major. So that's Chesapeake and the Metates project in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Yeah, certainly makes sense. Incremental steps. Well, delving into the big news then on the PEA, in terms of the production side of things and production metrics, what did the PEA confirm?
So the PEA confirms that as a smaller project at 15,000 tonnes a day through the crushing plant, which is quite a reasonable sized project, it'll produce on average 110,000 ounces a year for the first 15 years, and additionally another 2.5 million ounces of silver over those same 15 years to start with. And the project life would be 31 years. So plenty of room that if we wanted to expand it and reduce that life, we can look at that moving forward.
Fantastic. Great progress for investors looking at an increasingly de-risked project then. So coming on to the economics of the project, it's a very compelling position. Tell us about what the PEA found there in terms of the economics. Yeah,
the economics are significantly better than the previous project that was in a PFS in 2016. The capital cost went from 3.5 billion, which is a project that we could never finance, to 360. That's why we believe it's financeable. $360 million, you can come up with a financing plan that's doable for a project and a company our size. So that's the capital cost. Really big change, 90% less. And the cash costs of the production are less than $700 an ounce. So again, at current metal prices, that's margins of over $1,000 an ounce on 110,000 ounces a year. So we expect free cash flow of over $110 million a year once we're up and running. And that will allow us to potentially self-fund those expansions going forward. So the economics are really a compelling concept. It gives us the justification to keep moving along with the project. It shows that there's that credible, financeable, deliverable, and then expandable project behind it. And now it's move forward and do the work.
Yeah, certainly, that's a huge reduction in capital costs and very attractive margins, as you described, especially at today's bullish environment for precious metals. let's just focus in a bit more about scaling the operation, because you mentioned about how you've got a very clear and incremental plan to do that, and the economics support that that strategy. But what are actually the steps, and what are the next phases that perhaps investors should look out for in scaling?
So this was a PEA. The next step is actually to do the work to get to a pre-feasibility study. And as we do that, we'll look at what is the best way and when to expand. So there's a presentation deck on our website, which is chesapeakegold.com. Quite simple to remember. If investors want to have a look at that, and we've indicated a couple of places where you may look at doing an expansion and shortening the life a bit, instead of having 31 years and having to wait that long, double it up, shorten that to 15, 18 years. And obviously we expect the economics for that to be better. The other thing we've got to do is we did a bulk drilling program to get some fresh samples to do a bunch of metallurgical test work. And so we need to do that test work to prove up the technology and understand all of the various variables that went into the PEA to ensure that the numbers we're using are correct for when we do the PFS. And so that work is, the drilling's been done. There was a press release in June, late June, of the results from that drilling. And it was actually quite exciting because it showed that the average grade of those holes was 18% higher than the block model suggested would be there. And the implication of that is, well, gee, guys, let's go back and potentially infill drill around that high-grade core. With 20 million ounces, I don't need more ounces. I really don't need more ounces. But an increase of up to 20% in the early years of a project like this has a huge economic impact. So we're thinking about and looking at how and when we will infill drill that. And the idea of all the work we're doing, the metallurgical test work, if we do that infill drilling program, expanding out the environmental data collection, is to have everything ready to produce that pre-feasibility study towards mid-late next year that will tie everything together. That then we would put into the environmental impact statement with the local government, and then move forward with the feasibility study, financing, and construction. So it's a coherent work program that everybody does to develop a project. Certainly.
Excellent. Very clear. Just touching on what you're talking about in the scalability of this project, and how you've described Metates as a sleeping giant in some of your corporate literature, which is great. You know, there's some optionality here with the resource. Could you just delve into that a little bit?
Well, because we're starting with this smaller project, and if you look at how any of the really large major mines were developed, nobody built the whole thing out. Recently, they've started doing it. Unfortunately, recently, they've also learned that building mega projects is not as easy as it looks on the spreadsheet. Yeah, and personally, I've built mega projects, and there is a huge difference between building a multi-billion-dollar project and building a couple of $100 million. And having built both, I really do understand what I'm talking about. And being able to step in and then duplicate, triplicate, and expand up, it's the same as Escondida. Massive reserve, right? They built it really small compared to what it is today. I think it's less than a quarter. The original project was less than a quarter of the size of what Escondida is today. Right? We have the same concept, the same potential. We know where the elephant is, right? It's 20 million ounces, 550 or more million ounces of silver, sitting in Mexico, in Durango, a good place to be. We now know that there is a smaller starter project that we can step in and then self-fund and expand and expand and expand. How much do we expand? I don't know. I honestly don't know at the moment. 1.3 billion tons, and we're currently going to mine 160 something million of it. Yeah, we could expand 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, certainly. It's good, and that's a very earnest response in that respect. You're not sort of plucking out, sensational figures. It's great to hear that. Okay, so we talked about the technology that's behind the heap leaching process and how you've got some real advantage that you can bring to bear there. Could you just talk the viewers through what the status is there?
Yeah, so maybe a bit of background. I'm a metallurgist by profession. I've worked in the copper industry probably as long as I worked in the gold industry. Mm-hmm. And I've actually built very large projects. I built one of the largest SXEW plants in Chile back in the early 2000s, and that was the Spence project. And interestingly enough, that's where this whole concept and technology of oxidizing sulfides to then be able to get the gold and silver comes from. The copper industry has been doing this for over 30 years. Yep. And as I mentioned, I built the largest single copper SXEW sulfide heap leach at Spence in Chile in 2002 through 2006. So I know what it looks like. I know how it works. I know what you have. I know the intimate details of what you have to do. It's not just a concept to make it work. And so the concept of oxidizing sulfides is not new. The copper industry has been doing it for over 30 years. And that today, they produce over 1.5 million, maybe even as much as 2 million tons of copper out of a total production of 15 million tons. So 10% of the world's copper comes from the same concepts as we're going to apply to Metates. And so it's not new. Our technology allows us to do it in an alkali environment so as I can continue to use cyanide. And that's the key difference. If investors or viewers want to understand more, if there's a chemist amongst any of them, Google 3 words, alkali oxidation of pyrite, because that's what you're actually doing. And it's been around. There must be 20 years of research into it. It's currently being done in agitated leaches in different processes. We're applying that. We're taking the concepts from the copper industry, the chemistry that's already proven from the gold industry, putting the two together to be able to use it in a heap leach environment.
Excellent. That leads me to another point around, what's the reaction on the ground to this? This becomes a more technical project in that respect. How does that change the sort of operating environment on the ground there at your project?
It doesn't really change it a lot. You have an oxidation step and then the cyanide gold leach step. Right. So the cyanide gold leach step is exactly the same as every other oxide heap leach. What the oxidation step does is it literally changes gray rock into brown rock. Right? If you go look at any mine, you'll always notice there's this brown rock at the top, which is the oxidized material, and there's gray rock underneath. That's the unoxidized material. So we're literally accelerating nature in an alkali environment on a pad, and then doing the same that everybody else does, which is leach it in a heap leach, gold, cyanide, Merrill-Crowe, identical. Yeah.
Very good. So in terms of the operating environment more broadly within Mexico, how have you found things recently, just to get a taste of, how it's been operating throughout difficult travel, difficult period during the pandemics and the various lockdowns? How's the situation in Mexico at the moment for you as a key mining company?
Yeah, we're in Durango. I used to work for SSR Mining as the COO, and we had a project in Durango as well. So Durango has always been and still is a really good area to be in as far as Mexico as a whole goes. You have to be very careful when you generalize because it's location specific. It's what are your relations like with the ejido? We only have one. So the nice thing about only having one ejido, you've only got to negotiate with one group, and they're not competing against each other, right? Because often if you've got multiple ejidos, everybody's trying to one up the other one.
Right.
And we've had a long relationship. Chesapeake has been there 15, 20 years, working with the local ejido. When we recently did the drilling program, we got our drilling permits in 2 weeks, and then hired the locals back again, and off we went again, and did the 5 holes that we drilled and got our 10 tons of sample. So, my view on the world is you got to have a good local relationship.
Certainly.
If there's you and the locals on site, the locals actually help you and support you. I lived and worked for 3 years in Colombia. When Uribe was president, he just came in. It wasn't the easiest time in Colombia, but it wasn't the worst either.
Right.
But we were right in the middle of narco land and the ex-paramilitary land in
Yes.
Montevideo. And the DEA had their helicopters stationed locally. The local community used to help us and protect us because they valued our presence. If you can build that same relationship, they will protect you. And so that's why I say it's very, very dependent on where you are and what your relationship is in any country. If the locals don't want you, you're in trouble, because going to the federal government to solve a local problem never works. And we believe we've got a good relationship. It's been a long-term relationship. They've been supportive. They continue to be supportive. The local government of Durango is very supportive. I knew a lot of them when I was with SSR Mining as well. It's a very pro-mining province in Mexico. So
there it is. That's integral, as you described. Okay, then just to sum up then, for investors interested in Chesapeake with this improved and de-risked position, the situation at Metates, could you give us just a quick summary?
I think it comes back to the same thing. It's a massive deposit, over 20 million ounces of gold, over 500 million ounces of silver. The PEA demonstrates that there is a credible, financeable, deliverable, and expandable project that we can step into as Chesapeake without the need to bring in a major to help us, and then expand up in the future to really take advantage of the resource. As I've always said, we believe that Metates is the cornerstone asset that we can build the next mid-tier gold producer on. And I want to repeat what we did at SSR. And that's Metates and Chesapeake can do that. And that's what we plan to do.
Excellent. Fantastic. Alan, thank you very much for taking us through these key milestones towards entering production at Metates. And we very much look forward to catching up with you again and hearing about Chesapeake's progress on the next phase of development.
Adam, thank you very much. Thanks for your time. And it was a pleasure talking with you today about Metates.